Harris Teeter hired UFO expert Art Bell to compare their new Your Home brand of aluminum foil to the leading brand. First, the leading brand. Now the Your Home brand. Well, there you have it. Harris Teeter's new Your Home brand of aluminum foil stops those pesky alien mind control waves as well as the leading brand, and it keeps your food fresh. Harris Teeter's Your Home brand. The difference is in the savings.
Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back. I'm so happy to be here tonight to do what I hope will be sort of a celebration of the life of the late, great Art Bell. Many of you have heard me mention his influence on me, and he is largely the reason why I started a show like this. And the truth is that I wouldn't be here, and neither would most of us that cover these topics, if not for the trailblazer himself, Art Bell. So I brought a special guest tonight, Leah Prime, who is also, I heard her mention the legacy of Art Bell and how no one talks about it. I thought this would be a great idea. We should talk about it. But before we begin tonight, just some important business to mention. Many of you are aware of my very critical comments and stance regarding third phase of fake or third phase of moon, and ongoing sort of back and forth issues with third phase of moon and their employee, Rich from GoofOn. But many of you are not aware of why I was so adamant that they fake so many things. What many of you were not aware is that I was in communication with a researcher and excellent debunker from Reddit that goes by the name Sapiens Culture and has a YouTube channel, UFO Research. For the past several months now, I've been communicating with that person who has shared a great deal of information about third phase and some of their hoaxes and how they hoax things. One of the reasons I've been so adamant is because I've been in communication with both Sapiens Culture and other debunkers that have clearly shown with overwhelming evidence the amount of times that third phase has faked things. So Sapiens Culture has been collecting all of these hoaxes, and the proof and overwhelming evidence that they were hoaxes has been collected for quite some time now. Recently, I was in communication with him, and he expressed his desire to release a documentary of sorts that would be 2 hours or more in length and go through each of the hoaxes, hoax number 1, hoax number 2, hoax number 3. And earlier today, Sapiens Culture released that documentary to YouTube, calling it The Hoax Files, Third Phase of Moon Exposed. So I was watching it on YouTube previous to our broadcast a little bit earlier, before our broadcast tonight, and it had gotten to like hoax number 32 or 33, I think. I've lost track really of how many hoaxes are in this. It is 2 hours long, super fact-based, with evidence, all the proof of each hoax and how it was done, how they fake things. And by the way, for the benefit of Rich from GoofOn, also included in the documentary, Sapiens Culture took Rich's challenge. Rich said they haven't faked anything in 5 years. And so in the documentary, he says, challenge accepted. And then he shows all of these recent hoaxes and faked videos and exactly how they are done. So I'm watching this video and suddenly the video stopped playing. I thought it was my YouTube connection and then figured out it wasn't that. I hit refresh and found that the video had been removed. I went to email Sapiens Culture and found an email from him. And what the email from him states is that Third Phase of Moon hard striked his YouTube channel to have the video removed, claiming copyright. But very clearly, in his documentary, it opens with the usual copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowances made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. So he clearly was citing fair use. And in my opinion, Third Phase of Moon hard striked his channel to have that video removed because I'm telling you, friends, I'm one of the few people who has seen this video. It is the most damaging, damning evidence of the fakery, fraudery, and bull put out by Third Phase ever made. It goes back to their very beginning, showing hoaxes they did at the beginning. And it goes all through them, 2011, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2018, and on to the more recent ones, 2021 and more recent. This work of this researcher is important. It should never, ever be censored by the person that it is about. And this is a cowardly attempt to stop people from seeing this overwhelming evidence and proof that Third Phase of Moon continue to commit essentially fraud against the public and against YouTube. It's deceptive practices for sure. It's against YouTube terms of service to knowingly deceive people to get them to click on your video. And honestly, that's all they do. I don't want to take any more time. I didn't even want to talk about this tonight, but I think it's very, very important that people be made aware that Third Phase of Moon have just tried to stomp all over the free speech of a valid critic who has evidence. It's not like he's just talking smack on them and playing their copyrighted videos. You need to show their videos in order to show how they hoaxed them. So that documentary, I was going to, let it go. I was going to mention it. Maybe I would provide a link to it. But now, Third Phase of Moon made a terrible error here. Because now that they have tried to stop people from seeing it, I will be helping this researcher make sure that people can see it. We're still not sure. I have to figure out how we're going to do this. But I have multiple platforms, video platforms at my disposal, and we are going to post it everywhere. And then Third Phase can try to claim copyright on me and get these videos taken down. Unlike this other user, I've been through this before. I know how to defend it, and my lawyer letters are already pre-written for people who would make frivolous, false copyright claims. I will vigorously defend my right to broadcast this important work. And that's all I have to say about that at the moment. I will be behind the scenes working very, very diligently to make sure that we get this video uploaded to as many platforms all over the internet as possible so that they cannot silence the criticism of their fakery and fraudery. And that's all I've got for you. Now, on to Art Bell. I mentioned what a huge influence Art Bell was on me growing up. I would get in so much trouble. My father would come in my room, late at night and yell and scream at me. He threw a radio against a wall once in frustration because I would turn it off. And then as soon as my father went back to bed, I would turn it back on. I would get in so much trouble. The two people I got in a lot of trouble for was him and Howard Stern. I used to cut school just to listen to Howard Stern and get in trouble. So despite the trouble that Art Bell and Howard Stern have got me in, of course, they were big influences on me and made me so interested in this thing called broadcasting. You mean I could have a microphone and thousands or millions, like in their case, millions of people all around the world can hear what I have to say and what I have to talk about and important things. And I can interview guests and learn great things. Art Bell was just an incredible influence. And I think, many people recognize his contribution, but a lot of it gets lost. And he has, just been a huge influence on me, especially. I called my first show The Midnight Hour in homage to his Midnight in the Desert. Interestingly, I once got denied being on that Art Bell network because I wasn't enough like Art Bell. They wanted me to clone Art Bell better to be on their network, and I wouldn't do that. That's a whole nother story. But joining me tonight to talk about the legacy of Art Bell, we have Leah Prime. So welcome, Leah Prime.
Hey, Stephen. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And I was cracking up backstage listening to your story because I have stories just like that of
My
being caught
father
with my
threw a
radio with my
window at a
parents. Yeah,
wall. He
yeah, like
busted
my
one.
parents yelling about it, staying up all night, and I was in like sixth grade, seventh grade.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
and yeah, it's the same story with me, right? Like I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Art Bell. Um, I've been an amateur radio operator since I was like 9 years old. Even have a big tattoo of a
I had a
forearm on my
pirate.
forearm of a radio.
That's so funny. I
Like,
had a
yeah,
pirate CB radio station, and I used to just key the mic, and I
hmm
taped it so that it would stay keyed, and I would put it to the record player when I was very, very
incredible.
young, and just play records. And then when the record stopped, I would play DJ, and you know, uh, and my father was a CB guy, so there you go.
hmm Yeah, and I think I mean, right here is Art's legacy too, because he had this great kind of subversive streak on a platform or in a media that was otherwise pretty like buttoned up and conservative. Like he was the only one having these conversations at the peak of Coast to Coast. So I'm sure most of the people here know who he is, but Art Bell was the original host of Coast to Coast AM overnight talk show. At its peak, it had the third largest audience. So syndicated on over 400 stations. It was only behind like Rush Limbaugh and Laura Schlesinger at its peak. So we're talking like millions of listeners every night from, I think it was like 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. Eastern time. And I've been a listener basically my entire life. I always say I don't know shit about UFOs, but I know a lot about Art Bell. Um,
Well, I
and
wouldn't say that. No, I've heard you discuss it, and one of the things I like about you is that you bring in other people who are experts. I do that. Like I'm not an expert on certain things. If I need to know about this, you had this recent episode where you had the history of Nazism and its influence in
mhm.
UFOs, and you brought in Louis Caetano and others that were very knowledgeable about that. So I wouldn't say know nothing. You're doing it the right
Well,
way, though. You're getting an
what's
expert when you're lacking in the knowledge, right?
what's cracking me up over this too, and Stephen, kind of what got me turned on to your show pretty recently. So like I kind of moved back into ufology just a couple months ago,
Sorry to
and
hear that.
yeah, it's been a dark time in my life. So and I bring this up just because I saw that you were running shows basically exposing Jonathan Reed. And I can remember so distinctly hearing Jonathan Reed on Coast to Coast in the mid 90s telling his, like, spinning his story. And, I was probably 12, 13 years old, absolutely petrified, right? Like listening to this and using dial up internet to get to artbell.com and look at the pictures. Um, and here I am, gosh, 25 years later, listening to you talk about Jonathan Reed, watching all the same characters keep trotting out the same stories, right? Like Stephen Greer still around, Jonathan Reed, all these different characters, Linda Moulton Howe, Whitley Strieber, um, all these people that had tons of airtime in the 90s, early aughts, that are still sort of existing in this community,
Yeah, they're like
telling
the
telling the same
Walking Dead.
stories.
They don't go away, and
Yeah.
things go in cycles. I noticed, like Reed. I was surprised to see him pop back up again because his story had been so thoroughly debunked as garbage, and that he wasn't a real doctor. That wasn't his real name. His dog didn't die. It was so bad. And the so-called doctors that he said did the alien tissue sample analysis turned out to be a guy working at a convenience store that wasn't a doctor, just a friend of his
hmm
that he paid to lie and do an interview about the tissue samples. And it was so ridiculous. And then the fact that like Jimmy Church is going to host that guy and sit there and call him doctor for 2 hours, it
Right.
was just bizarre. I couldn't, and I too remember that whole story on Art Bell the first time. I think it was in 1996, as I recall, but
Yeah,
I'm
that
not
sounds
sure.
about right.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe that it popped back up. You know?
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the last time I was into this stuff, Stephen Greer was almost legit. Like that's when he was running these
That
disclosure events at
was a
the press
long
club
time
in
ago,
DC. Yeah,
Leah.
it's like
Yeah,
20 years ago. Um,
yeah.
and now I come back and I'm like, oh my god, he's running an expensive cult that like people join to meditate together. This is absolute insanity. Um, but I feel like, look, since Art died of like what 4.5 years ago, the world is a different place over the last 4 years. And our media environment's very different, but so much of the content creators were informed and shaped by him. Like he has this monumental legacy on like the podcast, high strangeness, ufology space. And I've been surprised that there's been kind of less discussion, even in an abstract sense, about how he kind of kicked off a lot of these movements.
Sure did. I mean, you know what? I think a lot of that is ego, though. Some guys like to pretend like that this was all their show was all their great idea. You know, and at least in my case, I acknowledged what a huge influence I've always, since I was a child, a very, very young child, I'm told by my family, like I've had terrible, terrible insomnia. So something like Art Bell on late at night, you know, interesting stories, interesting guests, fantastical things. I gravitated to that, and of course, I had an influence on me. You know, I don't know why so many others don't, you know, give him the credit that he deserves for many of them, because many of the shows are an absolute clone of the Art Bell show. In fact, he had that Dark Matter radio network, which when I first did my show, sent in demos and tried to get on there, and they said I wasn't enough like Art Bell, and then they wanted me to change all these things. And by the way, I had apologized to Linda Moulton Howe and somebody else who I don't recall before they would consider putting
like mea culpas.
Yeah, before they would consider putting me on the network. And I'm like, well, no, stand by what I said about her. I'm not going to apologize. And then I had this bizarre conversation with, I think it's Ian Parker, which was one of the people that replaced Art Bell at one time. And I said,
oh, Ian Punnett. Did you talk to Ian Punnett? Yeah.
Yeah. And I go, I don't understand. You want me to just clone Art Bell's show? He's like, yeah, that's what we do here. We have everybody that's just like Art Bell. And I'm like, that makes no sense. I can't be a better Art Bell. Why would I even try? You know, I have my own style. And it just ended funny with no, I'm not going to apologize. So I didn't get the deal.
Yeah, well, and there's like, I mean, the culture and landscape is different, but there's really a vacuum too. Like nobody's effectively stepped into his shoes, and I don't think anyone really can at this point. You know, you have people like in like Fits and Starts that are trying to occupy that same niche. They're not doing it very successfully, and they're also, you know, I mean, in Coast to Coast AM right now, as it exists, you know, hosted by George Norrie, is like a pretty anemic version of its prior self.
I'm really not.
It's like unlistenably bad. I haven't listened to it in years.
Try to not say it, but I'm going to say it. It's George Snorri. It's so bad, and just the level of and even Art Bell talked about this before he died. He talked about like how bad that he didn't even want his name associated with Coast to Coast after a while. Because it just seemed like they were willing to do any sensationalist thing to get viewers. But of course, after Bell left, the viewers dropped significantly, and now it's in the crapper. It's nowhere.
Yeah, the syndication numbers are like a fifth or something of what they were at the height. It's
we should talk about the technological achievement that Art Bell. I mean, he didn't invent syndication, but people don't realize this. This is before the internet. In order to get listened to or broadcast all over the country, there had to be a radio station every like 50 or 100 miles to take his show and, you know, his show feed and then boost it out to the local area. So it was a tremendous, even technological achievement. He had 300 or 500 stations at their height, all broadcasting from his feed in his home studio.
Yes,
and this was unheard
Nevada.
Of. Yeah, this was like unheard of. Nobody had a home studio. You needed a broadcast tower, which he had, and all the things that he needed, he figured out. And he might have figured that out during Vietnam when he was sort of like a pirate radio station guy in Vietnam, which is another interesting thing.
He like most of the stations too are AM stations, which propagate way better at nighttime. So like
that's weird. I never heard that, but that makes sense, right?
I'm from upstate New York, and we have this 50,000 watt boomer here, 810 WGY. It's like one of the first big AM stations. And when I've lived all over, at nighttime, I can pick up WGY like on a clear evening. So the station propagation is really good, but just the fact, you're exactly right, like the fact that he was able to support this from his house in Pahrump, Nevada, right, like in the high desert, you know, 90 miles outside of Vegas,
also known as nowhere
yeah.
Nevada. There's nothing there. Just
it is like Art Bell is the claim to fame and like the Nevada test site. So yeah, there's like nothing there, but he was supporting it. And I also remember there was a brief spell where he was broadcasting from the Philippines. So like after his
Yeah.
wife Ramona died, he remarried pretty quickly this woman, Erin Ruiz, out of Manila, and he moved there for a spell. And they had like an ISDN line or something set up in some high rise in the Philippines so he could continue broadcasting. Like the amount of kind of like technological capacity that was exerted to make sure he could keep his show up is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was interesting that he was able to still broadcast nationwide. And AM was kind of, I don't know, for me, AM was always crappy. You know, it was always like more staticky than FM. I would prefer to listen on FM, but you got to do what you got to do, you know?
No way, man. The static is part of the like thing. Like the set and setting for Art Bell is critical. Static, AM, nighttime, you know, it adds to the kind of ambiance. If you're getting this like super high def broadcast, I feel like you lose something.
Yeah, I don't know, but it was interesting that, you know, even before the internet, he was being listened to by like millions and millions of people. And I consider the internet the great equalizer in some ways because it gives everyone at least, I don't want to call it a level playing field because we can see examples how like YouTube, if you're a major media corporation, you're at the top of the search engines always, but at least it gives people a chance, and people who are independent. I'm trying to think of good examples, and the only examples I could think of are like really right-wing leaning people, but still they were able to get audiences of millions of people. Back then it was like mission impossible to get an audience of millions of people listening, but he did it through sheer determination and force of will and getting all these affiliates and getting it. And I remember that he used to announce new affiliates from time to time or new stations that were broadcasting his show. And it always seemed like he was just spreading out like a web across the whole country and later world, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. His growth was incredible. You know, he also did a great job basically exploiting an untapped market. Like this overnight slot stations always had difficulty filling. So the fact that he stepped in and did that was impressive.
And nobody wanted that slot.
Yeah, nobody wanted that slot. The only
No.
reason he got it was he was working as like a broadcast engineer, and one of the stations he worked at was like, hey, we need someone to cover from like 1 to 4 a.m. Can you do it? And he started doing it. He was broadcasting out of some broadcast studio in the Las Vegas Strip. I think it might have even been in a casino. But
That's
you know,
interesting.
he also was exploiting like the kind of burgeoning appetite that 90s and early aughts culture had for these kinds of subjects, right? So like before the internet was like before we were all like mainlining the internet 24/7, like the way you heard about this stuff was basically through Art Bell or like Twin Peaks or the X-Files. Maybe if you were into comics, you read like Grant Morrison's The Invisibles or something. But like to
You're
hear
right.
these subjects spoken about in a public forum in a way that they were treated, I mean, Art always said he was an entertainer, but like he was extremely credulous. He didn't dismiss people unless, you know, they personally pissed him off on the show. And this was, I think, kind of popular culture's first exposure to a lot of these fringe ideas. Like Bill Cooper, like he was broadcasting around this time too, but like he didn't have this kind of audience. Like he was broadcasting on shortwave, way smaller, way more niche.
Reach. Yeah, way
Yeah.
more of a niche and really fringe group of people that were interested in what Bill Cooper had to say. I think Art Bell popularized it for anybody, even if they had just a passing interest in any subject he talked about, could tune in and enjoy themselves listening, you know. But I did at times have problems with, you called it being credulous. Some may say gullible, but I don't think he was gullible. I think he was just willing to listen, you know?
Yeah, he was a master showman, right? Like I think at the end of the day, he was a deeply skeptical professional who understood the entertainment value of who he brought on the show. And he brought in, I mean, all sorts of people across all the spectrum of beliefs and identities. Like we associate him with all these paranormal subjects and ufology, but he had like, you know, like Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson, Gordon
Michio
Lightfoot,
Kaku.
Michio
Before
Kaku,
anybody
George
even knew who
Carlin.
Michio Kaku was, he was
George Carlin did one of his final shows with him in 1999. He had the author of the Turner Diaries on in the mid 90s, William Luther Pierce. I mean,
Yeah, that guy said a whole bunch of racist stuff too, and he
yeah,
got in a little bit of hot water for that. I
yeah, he
remember.
said a whole bunch of racist stuff, and Art went back at him and was like, I'm married to like an Asian
Yeah,
woman,
he
right?
called
Yeah.
that guest did not know that Art Bell was married to a Filipino woman, and he sat there being interviewed by Art Bell, and he said, "Any white person that marries a non-white person is a traitor to the white race." And Art Bell, like, there was
Just
a
like
long
flexed
silent
all over
pause.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he said, did you know my wife is Filipino? You know." And then the guy, trying to backpedal. That was a great show. I remember that one
Yeah.
specifically.
There were, and like I also, man, it's funny because like as I was preparing for this show so I could kind of put a few coherent thoughts together, I was going through like my mental Rolodex of like all the different guests. Like one of the ones that was really formative for me, anyone who knows me will not be surprised, was Terrence McKenna, right? Like 15, 16-year-old Leah sitting in my bedroom listening to Terrence McKenna.
Yeah,
That was like some
I remember
life-changing
that one.
shit.
I remember
Yeah.
that one too, and that one made me want to do LSD.
Yeah.
That one
Yeah.
made me want to try it, and
Hmm.
and maybe a year after that show, I did, and I didn't regret it, But I think that I was a little more educated and prepared. I never thought like, oh, this is going to be a party time drug. I was listening to McKenna, and then I got one of his books, and
Hmm.
just hooked on that. Like, yeah, let's explore consciousness and inner space, and
Yep.
see what this is about. And this was going to allow me to expand my consciousness, and this is stuff that I heard on Art Bell. So yeah, maybe he had an influence on many people as far as that is concerned too, because how many people heard that broadcast and thought, I got to try this, I got
Yeah.
to try
Well,
it, see what it's about.
yeah, I mean, I just think of it all as just being woven into this counterculture of the 90s. Like like I so distinctly remember it. And I also like just to get background, like I was raised in a very conservative Jewish household, not politically conservative, but like Jewish conservative. So like I didn't watch TV. Like
Wow.
I to this day, I still don't watch TV or movies. Like radio was my media outlet. And I'm an inveterate reader, right?
You know
So
what?
like instead of turning out super
That's so
innocent, I'm
funny.
reading and listening about drugs and aliens and like all this
That's so
wild
funny
shit
because
and playing on computers.
I worked for a pretty conservative Jewish family, and they were big on radio. And my boss said, "Well, radio is better." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you can work while you listen." And that makes a lot of sense. You
I mean,
can. You
it's like
can do something.
podcasts.
Yeah. But
Yeah, you can
TV, you sit
multitask.
there and you're just,
Yeah, man, TV thinks for you. Like, it's like
Yeah.
one of my like hot takes is I think TV is like really deleterious to people's minds, but I'm also biased. I literally like I have not seen any TV. I've seen a couple episodes of the X-Files. Um, but like
Well, yeah,
I
you
think
made an exception for that. And thank you,
yeah.
Patrick Sheehan, for your kindness, generosity, and support. I totally agree. Yeah, and
Um,
isn't it funny though that, like, I don't know, for me, I've always been scared of television and movies and getting sucked into wasting too much time because I'm very time focused,
mhm.
and I don't, I have friends that spend 8 hours a day watching Netflix, and I go, what
Oh
else
my
could you
goodness.
do with that eight
Right.
hours a day?
Yeah.
I can't do that myself.
People ask me all the time, like, how do you have time and energy to do all this stuff? And I'm like, dude, I don't work a second job in front of my TV. Like, I don't watch Netflix. I don't do any of that stuff. But I do listen to a hell of a lot of weird stuff. But but yeah, I mean, I just think of this kind of tapestry of like mid '90s kind of counterculture figures, right? Like I think of Art Bell, I think of Terrence McKenna. For me, like Robert Anton Wilson falls into that category. Because I mean, this is also well before you were being algorithmically delivered this kind of content. Like I was finding this
You had
content
to
on
tune
like
in on the
BBS's.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, you had to IRC, like you had to find
Remember
it.
PBSs and the FidoNet groups, the like
Oh yeah.
paranormal FidoNet groups, and
Yeah.
oh
Yeah,
man,
yeah.
I would wait like 3 weeks, and then I would like binge read everything on FidoNet that happened in the
Yeah,
past
or
3 weeks.
totes.
Yeah, and they would have the
Yeah.
text files of like what
Yep.
Bob Lazar said on Art Bell that week or whatever. It
Yes.
was funny. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, think of all the people we know now in like the ufology universe or like the sort of high strangeness universe that were really like birthed out of Coast to Coast. It's like George Knapp, John Lear, Bob Lazar, um, Timothy Good. Oh man, I can't believe I don't remember. that
Timothy Good
actual
is the
interview.
author of that one book. I think it's like Beyond Top Secret or something like that. He's an English researcher and he's quite gullible. And I think Art Bell lost his patience with him during an interview and just hung up on him. And then he took calls for the rest of the night. And that was a
I,
big show as
yeah,
well. Yeah.
this afternoon when I was like seeking Art Bell inspiration, I was listening to an interview. I think it was with George Green, who made some comment about how Ted Kennedy did a bunch of coke and tried to like sleep with George Green's daughter, who was 14, and Art Bell got like super flipped out, disgusted, hung up, and just like cruised on the rest of the show like nothing happened. A
Well,
consummate
back then he
professional.
couldn't talk about that stuff, you know. That
Yeah,
was
you can't say
very,
those things on
yeah,
radio.
yeah. Yeah, that's so funny. It is interesting, though. You're right about the algorithmic feeding. I maintain several different internet accounts to try to avoid that. You know,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to news, because people don't realize, but even the news that comes across your feed is curated for you. They
Oh yeah,
figure out you're right leaning, you're left leaning, you're libertarian, or whatever you are. They think they figure it out, and then they only feed you what they think that you will click on and consume, and that's very not a good way to get your news. You know, I want to
no,
hear all
it's
sides.
not.
But you're right. In the days of Art Bell with his show, you had to, number one, there was no streaming. You couldn't listen whenever. You had
Right.
to you had to schedule it like, okay, it's the weekend. I'm going to listen to Coast at this time. I'm going to turn my radio on and tune the world out. That was one of the things that I did love about Art Bell that I try to do here myself, is that, especially through the pandemic, I realized that people wanted an escape, and
Hmm.
that's what Art Bell was for me as well. Like, I would turn that on, and I would tune out the entire universe and just listen to the guest and him and imagine the possibilities. So it was a huge escape for, I'm sure, more than me, right?
Hmm. Oh yeah, and it was also apolitical. I mean, he identified as like a lowercase L libertarian, so back before it was trendy, I guess. But he deliberately went away. Like he had a political show in the '80s and deliberately left it behind because he thought it was exhausting. Like he understood the entertainment value of the medium, and did a great job showcasing it. Oh yeah, I remember the above top secret message board. I
Spooky
spent
said,
a lot of hours there in my in high school.
me too. Spooky said English researchers are the worst. I would tend to
I mean,
agree.
that's fair.
Spooky. That's fair. Yeah. And Australians like Ross Coulthard. I have
Yeah.
definitive proof of alien technology. No, you don't.
Yes. Yeah. Um, so yeah, were there like any episodes or guests that stand out in your mind, Stephen?
Well, I certainly always tuned in when there was Bob Lazar or George Knapp talking about Bob Lazar, or um, anything that was UFO related. I was instantly, once in a while when he did those shows about like werewolves or shadow people, I would be a little disappointed, but I would still listen. But it was the
Hmm.
UFO shows that got me, especially the Bob Lazar stuff, because at the time I was totally a believer. I thought Bob Lazar is the real deal, and
Oh,
I
you
just
had
didn't.
like a true believer phase?
Oh, I did. I didn't know better. I didn't know that you have to dig deeper. And for some reason at the time, Bob Lazar just resonated. I was like, oh, it's proof of everything that I believed already. So I love it.
Yeah. Well,
It was like,
this is also the era of like the Tuesday night Fox special of alien autopsies, right? Like
yes,
this is a very
yes.
particular media environment to cultivate these beliefs.
Yeah, it's interesting too that I'm sure that Art Bell probably did some shows on alien autopsy, as I recall, but
Oh
not
yeah.
not before. I think before it got totally busted as a hoax, because I don't blame him. After it gets totally busted as a hoax, you don't want to remind people that you were all chips in on it. It was so popular at the time.
Yeah. Oh, I see one of the comments here. You can still see the original Art Bell website. It's on archive.org. It was
Yeah, the original one
developed by the
is,
OG Keith Rowland with the like Star Trek panels and the like
and the
goofy like
gifs, the
GeoCities
bad
JPEGs and
animated
stuff.
gifs. Yes,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
it's
I'll see if I
incredible.
can't
It's like
pull it
stepping
up.
back in time.
I just visited there to get some background information on Jonathan Reed, because I remembered that it was on artbell.com
Hmm.
when he originally, I'm going to see how far back it goes. I'm looking at it now.
It goes far. It goes back to like 1996, I think. I was clicking around on it earlier today.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. It goes back to 1999, I think. We'll see how far back. Boy, I remember those web pages. Remember programming a web page in Notepad with
Yeah,
HTML, just writing it?
HTML and yeah,
Yeah,
pre-CSS.
just writing
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
those
Everybody
are
asks
the
me
glory days of the internet.
Everybody asks me why I don't have a website for the show, and I say I don't think people would want to see my notepad written HTML website today. I have to get somebody that
Yeah.
knows what they're doing. This is some of it, yeah. And look,
Oh, this is such a blast from the past.
this is how crude the internet used to be. You had to keep those images tiny because of people on dial-up. This image would take a few
Yeah,
minutes
it would take like a minute to show up.
and then you would get the text links. Yeah. And it's interesting here. We have this is from 1999. Joseph Firmage, the dog's death wish. I don't remember that one. The Y2K bug. I got carried away by the Y2K
Oh
bug.
yeah.
That was
Yeah.
big on here.
You
Ghost
you
Wolf.
can't I was gonna say like too, like you can't overstate how much just in the I guess like popular imagination, like Y2K loomed over people in the mid and late 90s. And Art Bell dug so hard into
Oh,
that, talking about like
here's
the coming
Daniel.
apocalypse.
You're right, the coming apocalypse, and here's Daniel Brinkley. I'm sorry,
Oh,
we have a little bit
beautiful.
of an echo, so I don't mean to talk over you. Daniel Brinkley. Daniel Brinkley's the guy who was working with David Wilcock recently that died a whole bunch of times. Oh, there's not images, but Daniel Brinkley is a guy who claims to have near-death experiences, and every time he needs money, he dies again and writes another book. I love it. I love it.
Fantastic.
Look, I need some money. I'm going to have to die again and write a new book.
He's
I
operationalized his
think he's up
business
to
vision.
4 near-death experiences, and every time he dies and has a near-death experience, he writes a book. But he got busted real bad because he claims he woke up in the morgue and stuff, and the doctors at that hospital are like, that's absolute garbage. That never happened. He claims he woke up in the morgue with a toe tag on. They thought he was dead or something. Oh, it's a great story.
The breadth of grifters on this show were amazing. Who was it that was just in federal prison? Like Sean David Morton?
Sean David Morton was on Art Bell many, many times. Yeah.
Yeah, and then was thrown in the clink for securities fraud.
Yeah, he stole millions of dollars from people's grandmas, a bunch of old ladies and stuff.
Yeah, real stand-up guy.
And David Adair, who's still around. David Adair.
Oh man, David Adair. He was the one who talked about being tapped for like one of the like Air Force programs in high school, I think, and maybe was it Serpo or like some exchange program or something.
That guy's out there. I tried to interview him a few times, and he always scheduled and then canceled at the last minute because I'm a terrible person. I didn't tell him, but I want him to talk about these. He sells these really expensive, like stupid magic wands made out of brass and crystals and shit for like $500. And he makes all kinds of claims about what these magic wands do and sacred geometry and all this weirdness. But of course, there's no proof they do anything other than fill his pockets with money from stupid people. Michael Cremo, he's still around. This is a list of past guests from Art Bell's website from 1999. Stan Deho.
It's like a who's who.
Yeah, Jim Delatoso. He's another one. Self-described image expert, analysis expert that didn't go to college. He faked his education.
Oh, Matt Drudge was on that list.
Yeah, wow. Look at that. Stanton Friedman, of course, was there.
Oh yeah, an OG.
Tuned in for him.
Mark Furman. That's right. He had Mark Furman on, and Mark Furman went on the kind of rant that now would get him probably killed in the street, talking about the O.J. Simpson trial.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it is funny. It was a slightly different time. Once in a while, I listen to some of the old Art Bell shows, and I'm kind of surprised at what people talk about and how there's like a lot more almost like right out in the open racism and stuff that people.
Yeah, they're not subtle about it.
People used to be allowed to say those kind of things and not get canceled, but not anymore, Oh, and Dolores Cannon, I have some of her books, Nostradamus prophecy books. Charles Cagle, Brad Butler. Some of these names are not familiar to me, but
Major Ed Dames, he was the big remote viewing guy.
Courtney
Oh, Courtney
Brown.
Brown. So I actually shot you a message on Twitter. So I found an
Yes,
episode talking about
yes.
Courtney Brown and Heaven's Gate. It was from like November 19th, 1996, talking about the UFO following Hale Bopp, which is largely credited for influencing the Heaven's Gate suicide, since they literally linked to Art Bell's website off their website.
Yeah, yeah, that was just really sad. Oh, Stephen Bassett. He's been I remember him promising UFO disclosures coming any day now on Art Bell.
For
And
30 years. Yeah.
30 years, he's still promising next year is going to be a big year for disclosure. I just know it. Yeah, that's funny how many of them are still around and still kicking around, selling their wares, right?
Yep. Telling the exact same story to new people.
Yeah,
Running the same grifts.
somebody once I was once talking to somebody that's been around in this thing for 50 years, and I said I don't understand how these people pop back up like so much. And they said, well, new people come in all the time, so people
Mhm.
just forget. They just don't, they didn't know they were full of it, and so they're willing to listen and have an open mind, and
Well, and
did a
also
bunch
true believers want to believe, right? It's a
you're,
religious
oh, you're
thing.
right.
It's
You're
like
right.
it's like fundamentalist religion. It's not only do they continue believing, but every proof that their belief is wrong just further encourages them to strengthen their faith that they're going to have disclosure.
Patrick Sheehan is mentioning Father Malachi
Oh
Martin.
yeah,
Oh, that's another great
he's a
one.
real one.
Yeah.
He's an OG. Those are great. He was
And I'm Catholic, so for me, that was like a big deal because
oh, I bet.
generally in Catholicism, the priests, you can ask them questions, but they try to not talk about demons and demon possession and exorcism. They don't want to encourage people to be too curious about the world of demons and
The cool
all of that stuff.
stuff.
The cool
Yeah.
stuff, yeah. And I grew up Catholic, so that's all I wanted to know about from the priests. I used to get in trouble, and then I got a copy. I was an altar boy, and I went into the priests had their own library, or study. I guess I would call it a library. The bookshelves on both sides of a huge room, and I got the Roman Rite, which is the exorcism ritual, in both English and Latin. And I borrowed that book and got in a lot of trouble for borrowing that book. I don't know. I don't think they would have minded if I borrowed any other book, but because I borrowed that specific book, they wanted to, why are you so interested in this? And because it's cool. It's the devil.
Yeah, it's the
I
cool
want to
stuff.
know. Yeah.
It's the interesting stuff. It's not the boring stuff. Yeah, Malachi Martin was awesome, right? He was an exorcist, right? Spent time at the Vatican.
Former guest is here. Cal Korff was a guest on Art Bell several times. Says, I'm grateful to Art Bell for
right
the
on.
3.5-hour debate against Jim Delatoso, who admitted he had a fake PhD during that. That's great.
Incredible.
Yeah. And Cal Korff was on the bad side of Art Bell for a while. I can't remember, but they got in some kind of beef or spat, and people still bring it up. And it happened so many years ago. And Cal Korff had to apologize to Art Bell, and then they were okay. So I don't know what all that, but that was a bunch of controversy. And anybody who dislikes Cal Korff now always brings that up. Like, didn't you get thrown off of Art Bell's show or something?
Yeah, the dubious distinction of being kicked off.
I think he kicked a lot of people off. And, along with all the good with Art Bell, there was some, I always remember hearing rumors of him being extremely short fused at times. Like one time, I just heard from a
I'm
guest.
not surprised to hear this.
I just heard from a guest that threw him off the show because the guy only had a cell phone, and he was like, no, you're not coming on my show with a shitty sounding cell phone. Get a landline or you're not coming on my show. And he hung up on him.
Yeah. Well, in a perfect example of never meet your heroes. I've been doing deep dives just into his biography. I read his autobiography, The Art of Talk. It's available actually on archive.org. You can just read the whole thing.
Oh, I got to do that.
But he was a deeply unpleasant person, I think, in his personal life.
He was kind of gruff. Maybe he was a gruff kind of old man. I had an uncle like that. He was a great guy, but he was always in a bad mood. He was always
peak engineer personality. And I don't mean computer toucher engineer. I mean build with your hands, like radio engineer. He lived alone in the middle of the desert for a reason, fantastic.
Yeah, There's an exorcist guy pretending to be casting demons out who sells a cross and holy water for only $300.
I
Yeah,
don't think
YouTube.
that's Malachi Martin though, because Malachi
No,
Martin never
Malachi
made any
Martin
cash
died.
grabs.
No,
Yeah,
he
and he
wrote a
just never
book
was into
though.
that stuff. Yep, yeah, he wrote a book.
Wrote a book. That's a terrifying book too. If you read that, it really will convince you the devil is real and on planet Earth sometimes. You know. Yeah, and Dead Minds broadcast says Art Bell live broadcast of the
Oh
Phoenix
yeah,
Lights incident was awesome.
the
Also,
Phoenix Lights episode is a classic. That one's amazing.
yeah, I just think every once in a while I selfishly, I'm a selfish person, Leah. When somebody dies, this is very selfish. Like when a songwriter dies, I get selfishly upset. Not because they died. Well, I'm a little upset because they died. Like when Tom Petty died, I was upset. But do you know what most of me was thinking?
No new content.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Most of me was thinking, I wish he would have taken better care of himself so that,
Yep.
because imagine the genius songs that guy wrote and all of them that he could have wrote if he had 10 more years, and especially when somebody dies young, all these grunge guys who killed themselves or ended up dying from heroin or whatever. I think that's so stupid. You could have written so many great songs if you would have lived, And I feel the same way about Art Bell. Like selfishly, when I heard he died, I went, man, he's not going to come back from retirement again, because he did that 5 times. I'm retired. I'm back. I'm retired. I'm back.
1998 to 2015, it was like 6 or 8 times. Well, and it kills me too, because if there were ever a time when his voice was needed, it would have been the last few years, right? Between COVID, January 6th, like everything going to hell. He would have been a very good voice in the night, kind of, I would say, sort of.
Yeah, and I would love to hear what he would have had to say about some of the current characters that were,
for sure,
popped up, like Elizondo coming out of the CIA or whatever. Like what would he have thought about all of that stuff?
Yeah,
or would he have embraced them to get the views?
I mean, he was very much politically like classic libertarian through the 90s and early aughts. But by the end of his life, he was swinging pretty hard towards, like, I would say, like a pretty hard right turn politically as well. But
you're right about him staying. He largely did not discuss, or
he
stayed
wasn't
out
political.
of politics. I took that from him. I always think, Leah, if I express my opinions on any subject, I'm going to alienate half the audience. So why would I do that?
Yeah,
and my opinions are my own. I don't think I should be pushing them on other people.
Yeah, look. Anyone who knows me knows I have political ideas and opinions, but in these kinds of environments, like, I think it's just salient to talk about them as like traits or characteristics that somebody possesses, right? As a descriptive terminology. But he had he had a lot of shows. He had pretty intense coverage of like Waco and Freeman on the Land, like Ruby Ridge, the Oklahoma City bombing. Like, he was covering these things in the 90s, and it's also important to keep in mind that at this point, when we were thinking about kind of American conspiracy culture, like, this is before Alex Jones, before even David Icke being very popular. So most of the conspiracy culture was basically founded on being anti-federal government. Which
is something I agree with largely.
Right, I was gonna say, like, I mean,
it's
they're
easy
right,
to
but
get
for
on
wrong
board
reasons.
with this. They're dickheads. They take my money for
I get it.
Yeah. And Mystery Eon gets the comment of the night. I hope you're not easily offended.
I'm not offended.
He says, she talks like a hot NASA scientist. I'd believe anything she told me.
I'm going to put this in my Tinder profile.
Yes, Leah's working on her Tinder profile, Mystery Eon. Maybe you should ask her for the link, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that staying out of politics, for me at least, is a generally good idea. When people start, and I noticed, I won't name names, but I've had a few guests on that started like telling, they started pushing their beliefs about different things, and it turned the audience off instantly. I could tell from the live chat. People are like, why is she talking about this? She's, this person's supposed to be talking about something else. Why are they talking about, this or that? It just, people aren't tuning in for that. Now, if I had a political show, of course you'd talk
be
politics.
different, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, also think about how few spaces exist in modern life now that aren't political. right? That's one of the things, kind of the safe harbor of ufology for me in a way, or high strangeness. Yeah, he did. In his early career, he did cover a lot of politics. His Area 2000 and like CBC show, which like predated Coast to Coast in the early 90s, he did talk about politics and then explicitly moved away from it because he thought it was basically an exhausting topic. Got tired of all the arguments.
Yeah, and there are some things too about his early life that people weren't aware of, like that he was a DJ in Vietnam, and he played all the anti-war songs that the regular radio, Fortunate Son, and all of this, you know, all those anti-war songs, Imagine and everything. He was playing all those songs in Vietnam where the U.S. station wouldn't play, like the official station wouldn't play any anti-war songs.
He had a really impressive and resounding like subversive streak or contrarian streak. I think he was just anti-authoritarian in general. He largely made his whole career on AM radio until the end, which is when he was being streamed on Sirius and then Dark Matter Digital Network, when he was hosting
Midnight. And I think they're still around Dark Matter.
I think so. It was taken over after he left in 2015. His sort of acolyte Heather Wade took over and then left for a directly competitive time spot. But I think the network, Keith Rowland owned it after his retirement, and then I think sold it. I don't remember who it was sold to though.
Yeah, well, it's a shadow of its former self without him. So
yeah, exactly.
Now, last that I had any interaction with them, they were looking for everybody to be an Art Bell clone and to specifically clone their show to be just like Art Bell's. And I think that's a stupid way to try to do something. You can't, an imitation. It's like a copy of a copy, you know. A Xerox is never as good quality as the original. And for them to say, we want you to just copy Art Bell's style, his voice. They wanted me to talk like, I remember specifically, do you think that you can talk more like Art Bell? I'm like, it's my voice. What do you want me to do? More. You know, like, what do you want me to do? Steal quotes from him? Or, you know, I don't know. It's just kind of bizarro, you know?
It's, I think the other thing that's worth noting too is this is going back to like algorithmically delivered content. Like this is before all of that. So what he was talking about every night was your choice. You got to listen to Art Bell, and whoever the guest was what you were going to listen to. I just feel like that sort of really broad swath of audience creation just doesn't exist now because there are podcasts and live streams that basically are just hyper niche. So you don't get this same kind of like broad audience space. They're basically held captive.
You're right. He had just such a range. Like one show you would tune in and he was talking about werewolf sightings, and the next show you would tune in and he was talking about interdimensional time traveler or interviewing a time traveler or something. It was a lot less segmented. Now it seems like totally segmented now.
Such niche content now. And so his time travel shows were those were the ones that I always found really captivating. Like Madman Markham, who showed up in the 90s and then showed back up on Dark Matter in, I think, 2015. David Lewis Anderson and the Time Travel Institute. And then, Art was also at the center of the John Teeter stuff. Like John Teeter, he was never on the show. He never called in. He wasn't a guest, but he sent Art a couple faxes about 2034 and about Y2K. And I was super fascinated by the John Teeter story. I thought it was really fascinating. To me, it also felt like in hindsight, thinking back, one of the first kind of ARG style media events where I could see it would pretty successfully snowball into like broader like media stuff, like movie or a book or something like that, because it was very captivating, caught a lot of audience attention, and then also caught a lot of attention on the post to post forums, which was the big Art Bell like internet forum.
Yeah, and first Mysterion is still trying to hook up with you, and I don't know why, but all these guys come to my show, and every time there's a female guest on, they think this is Tinder. This is not Tinder.com. I'll send you her YouTube. One of the moderators can put it in the live chat. And then Benny asked about the Area 51 caller. That was another big one. You remember that when somebody called in frantic, screaming, and
1997. Yeah, called in, shrieking about Area 51, that they're not extraterrestrial, they're interdimensional beings. I think Tool picked it up for a song. I'm not a Tool head, but I know that that's how most people know that call. And the really kind of, I can remember I heard that call live, and what added extra spook to the factor was Art's transmitter went down immediately after the call was terminated, and it went down for about 20 minutes, and you couldn't figure out why. And when he finally got back on the air, you could tell he was pretty rattled by the whole thing. And it, subsequently created like this whole mythology around that caller and around, whether it was valid or not.
Yeah, and one of the things, I guess, do you remember the controversy with this Heather Wade?
Oh
She
yeah.
sort of, yeah, there was a whole lot of controversy, and then Art Bell's widow spoke out against this Heather Wade, and Heather
Yeah, there
Wade was
were.
one of the people that tried to sort of take over the show after him, you know.
Yeah, no, so when he retired for the final time in 2015, she took over as the guest. I'm not totally sure what the relationship was, if she was basically just his protege or what. I know that after his full retirement, she was continuing to broadcast out of the Bell property in Pahrump, and that created a lot of tension with Aaron. And yeah, there's a pretty, I mean, candidly, a pretty heartbreaking set of comments from Aaron Ruiz Bell after Art's death, basically asking her and the broader Art Bell community and fan club to like chill out and, stop stirring up all the drama.
Yeah, I followed some of that, and I remember thinking that there was a bunch of people that wanted that Art Bell seat, and to be honest, to this day, there's still a bunch of people. I mean,
Yeah.
George Snorri got it, but there was also, you know, uh, Jimmy Church thought that he
Yep.
deserved that, and
Jeff Rents.
Jeff Rents,
Yep.
other people, George Knapp.
I
Um,
I saw one of the comments in the chat here. I have it open. That someone needs to do a documentary on Art Bell, and that's like I'm gonna plug my thing for a second, which is that so I'm on a work sabbatical right now. Took a bunch of time off work to pursue passion projects, and how this all really started is I'm trying to interview and research and document Art Bell, both to create some kind of comprehensive research resource for people, but also to talk to creators and audience members about his legacy. And I bring this up because I'm fully convinced that he had this like extraordinary impact on our current media and cultural landscape, and there hasn't been like appropriate attention paid to it. And I also think that like, dude, like we're living in this like epistemological crisis. We're watching like the unwinding of consensus reality, and in so many respects, like he kicked it off, right? Like he was the one who was giving airtime to all these people, and I don't think he would have ever imagined it reaching the point that it has. But in many respects, like what we're experiencing now was underpinned by a lot of like his showmanship and guests and proclivities in the 90s and aughts.
Yeah, he definitely. I think that his cultural impact is underappreciated or realized, really. I mean, it just maybe I'm a little more tuned into some of this stuff lately, Leah, but just the
Mhm.
sheer proliferation of shows about UFOs in the past 2 years. And again, I'm always somebody that respects the trailblazers. He was the
Right.
first guy to do that, and I'm sure that the first bunch of business guys that heard this pitch, like, well, we're just going to talk about paranormal and werewolves and UFOs and time travel and portals and aliens, they probably went, no, this is not going to work. You'll have a bunch of tinfoil hat people and not a big audience. But he persisted and proved that millions of people would tune in to hear this stuff every week.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like one of the theories I trot out pretty frequently is that like we're living that like contemporary Western culture doesn't have very good narratives to create meaning in our lives. And it makes sense that the paranormal and the mysterious and numinous and UFOs and experience or phenomenon kind of becomes this like stand-in for what historically we've had like mythology and
It fills
like
the
communal
void we have.
spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like that was one of the big things that kind of brought me into ufology initially was I had this like experience of spiritual emergence last year, and like I understood it as framed through like a theological or historical framework, right? Like my what I knew about like mysticism and transcendence. But the more I heard like experiences in ufology, I just remember thinking, oh, these are people that are having like mystical awakenings, but like we don't have terminology for it in contemporary culture. So people see it through the lens of like the X-Files
I was going to
or
say that.
like,
See it through the
yeah,
lens of modern of all the news is about space, and maybe there's life
yeah,
in space and
it,
rockets and
exactly.
all this exploration that they're up to and looking for exoplanets. So maybe people see it through that lens of aliens, where before they would interpret the same thing as demons or aliens or fairies, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like like humans have had these experiences since time immemorial. And, in the Middle Ages, it was Julian of Norwich talking about her visions of Christ when she was an anchoress in the basement of a church. And in like the 1960s and 70s, it was Philip K. Dick encountering the computational universe through Valis. But like, this is the same shit happening in both these people's brains. It's just framed or interpreted like by their cultural context.
Yeah, some people aren't aware, but Whitley Strieber never even used the word alien in his
Right.
book.
Yeah.
He interpreted it as what it was, which was a strange, unexplainable experience with otherworldly entities. That's what he
Yeah.
would say. He never said the word. He never said they were aliens. And to this day, he'll tell you he doesn't know if they were aliens or interdimensional beings or demons or angels
Yeah,
or
I
all
don't
of the
even think
above.
he may not. I don't, and like I to be clear, like I haven't read anything beyond Communion, but like I don't even think he makes claims about them being necessarily like other entities and not just manifestations of his mind, right? Like he doesn't seem to draw any meaningful conclusions about them other than recounting this like super weird stuff that happened to him.
Yeah. I interviewed him once, and that was kind of surreal for me because I remembered reading his book growing up and being just totally engrossed in this, like, oh my God, people are getting contacted by aliens or whatever it was, it looked like alien on the cover. So people just assumed that he
Yes.
meant alien. But we can see other examples of similar looking entities like Aleister Crowley's
Hmm.
Conjuring, and who knows what they are.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when that book came out, I think that cover was so distinct. It tapped into something in the collective unconsciousness because people certainly bought up that book, and that everybody knows the cover of that book, even if you haven't read it. Like it's familiar to everyone.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's a new version of it coming out, and I think that he didn't put that iconic thing on the cover
Yeah,
anymore.
it looks like it could be a Jonathan Franzen novel now because all it says is like communion with like a blurry like landscape picture or something on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's I think is a bad idea because that was so iconic,
Yeah.
and it may be responsible for all these people describing their alien encounters exactly
Hmm.
like that.
Oh, so somebody mentioned JC. Yeah, Jonathan Christian Webster III, God's 10-star general in the war on media pornography. One of my favorite repeat callers. He used to call Art Bell the devil's mouthpiece and would tell Art that cats were Satan's familiars. He was this crazy fundamentalist Christian who would call in screeching up and down the call line. Um, about art. And I don't think, yeah, so someone in the chat's postulating it may have been Ramona. I don't think it was Ramona, just because these calls continued after Ramona's death in 2006. Yeah, look at all these. That's right. I forget that Strieber has written like basically a library of additional stuff.
He is very prolific in his writing and
Yeah.
always writing another book, according to
Oh,
him
I,
himself.
I did read his book with Jeffrey Kripal, Supernatural, but that's just because I like Jeff Kripal, not because I like Whitley Strieber. Um, but yeah, that's the version of Communion I have kicking around.
Yes, I'm sure I have it on my bookshelf somewhere as well as a couple of these other books. There was, I think I have this Unholy Fire and a few others. Interesting stories, but I always want more evidence, and so that's, I guess, the problem that I have with him, that I have with a lot of people. It's just like, okay, you're selling a book about this, but where's I always have a problem with these alien abductions or experiences. Like, I'd set up a camcorder, but then they always
Hmm.
say something like the camcorders won't work. They know about them, or, some excuse for why we can't get film of this stuff. And it was also interesting that, the Communion movie, like, Christopher Walken was playing him
Oh,
too
that's right.
nutty.
Chris Walken was in that.
He was playing him too nutty, and he just said, if the shoe fits, wear it, buddy. Like, Whitley Strieber told him, you're going a little too far to the nutty side. And he's like, if the shoe fits, wear it, buddy.
If Whitley Strieber is saying that, then you probably are going a little too deep into the crazy side.
Yeah, I had a very that interview with him was largely great, but then he started talking about being butt probed and like why would he make up a story about being butt
That's like
probed
Patreon
and
content,
that
not
wasn't fun. Getting butt probed wasn't fun. This is not fun, Steven. Getting anally probed, and I was like, I
Thanks,
was
Whit.
so uncomfortable. I didn't know what to say about that. You know, like where do we go from here? So
He falls squarely too in that space. Like he seems like a nice guy. Like he seems like a pleasant guy to talk to, and
he
when
is
pleasant
very
people make those
likable too.
claims,
You know, people
it's like
thought I
even
didn't go
harder
hard
because
enough.
you
You
want
didn't go
them to be
hard enough.
assholes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't
Oh
go
yeah,
hard enough at him, Steven. You should have really pushed him more. And I go, I tried, but he's such a nice person that's
Right.
like
Yeah, he
and
seems like a
likable
likable
that
dude.
he disarmed me. He made me like a little more timid than I might have been otherwise, you know. And I'm sure I was a little bit starstruck having grown up with some of his books, and you know, and it was so weird because I had just read or just watched the Christopher Walken movie like a few weeks before the power went out at my cabin, but I have solar backup, but then no internet too.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through old DVDs and I found the Communion DVD with Christopher Walken and I watched it. And a few weeks later, for some weird reason, I got an email from Whitley Strieber. It was related to the Angelique case because he had just
You
interviewed
know what
her
they
or
say about
something.
synchronicities?
Yeah, and I
Steven?
go,
The
this is
community
so
loves
weird. But
synchronicities.
of course, I said, I just watched that Christopher Walken movie. That was great. Can I get an interview? And he said yes. So there we go. You
What a
know,
dude.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Art, like that's the other thing too. So like Art was running his radio show, obviously, but he wrote too. Like he wrote The Quickening, which is basically kind of an accelerationist take on modern culture and society. He wrote God, I have a signed copy of his book with Brad Steger. I can't remember what it's called. He wrote The Coming Global Superstorm. That was the one he co-authored with Strieber that got made into The Day After Tomorrow. Then he had his autobiography, The Art of Talk.
I've got to read that. I've never have, and I'm surprised that I never have. I hear you mention
It's
so
on
many books.
archive.org.
I hear you mention so many books that you've read, and I'm jealous because you know what? I'm one of those people that buys a lot of books. And I heard a friend describe it this way. When you buy a book, you're not really buying the book. You think you're buying yourself the time to read the book and that relaxation time, you know? And also I'm very cheap, but books I always justify to myself because you're feeding your brain and you have to feed your brain good stuff. So yeah, what else are you gonna spend money on? Feed your mind good, you know, good information and try to expand your mind. So I buy a lot of books and then they go on a bookshelf and then I remember them 3 months. Usually I get back to them though, but I have a big pile. Now I've been taking them to the cabin.
I have like
shelves.
I have so many books on my to read list. I'm like surrounded by them right now.
Oh yes, and somebody's mentioning that. That's another one of those famous ones. David Wilcock, before he was largely famous as David Wilcock, I'm convinced it's him. I've compared the voices, the diction, the phrasing. I'm convinced it was David Wilcock. David Wilcock, for those unaware, many people claim this. I can't prove it, but it is widely talked about that David Wilcock called into the Art Bell show. There's a recording online. You can listen to it where David Wilcock, not as David Wilcock, as somebody else, claimed to be a time traveler and called into the Art Bell show and talked to Art Bell for a while about that. Sounded like him to me.
Incredible.
Yeah. So there's all those connections, right? And of course, David Wilcock would have been connected to Art Bell at the time, you know, and listening. So I don't doubt that he would have called in pretending to be a time traveler.
Yeah, I've gotten such a kick out of seeing your Wilcock, your Wacky World of Wilcock videos, because that's how I know who he is from Coast to Coast.
And maybe Ancient Aliens, other people know him.
Oh yeah, dude, I don't watch TV. I have no idea. The only Ancient Aliens guy I know is that Tsoukalos Aliens dude. That's it.
Yeah, it's sadly used to be able to find that pretty quickly. I was seeing if I could find the clip of and I can't right now. So if anybody in the live chat finds the clip of David Wilcock calling into Art Bell
as the time traveler.
As the time traveler. And of course he denied that. And I don't know that somebody voiced print ID'd it, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close to his voice. It sounds just like him. And that just sounds like something stupid he would do. You know, I mean, after all, he channels Jesus and the Egyptian god Ra. He's Edgar Casey reincarnated, so why not pretend to be a time traveler too? You know.
Of course not. It's all the same.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about the project you started, the show that you're doing? Because I think
Oh,
more
yes.
people need to hear about that.
Sure. So I've been doing a project called the Invisible Night School with a handful of people in the ufology community. So it's me, it's UAP Study, this guy Campbell Morera, UAP Study on Twitter, Nick Coffin Callis, who's Invisible Night School on Twitter. And we have kind of like some rotating, we've been just calling them like faculty, like people to join the conversation. And we're hosting live streams and then also Twitter Spaces. And the real objective, when we're talking about ufology and high strangeness and stuff, but the real objective, candidly, is to try to elevate the conversations that are happening around this subject and to do it in a way that, by example, shows audience members or listeners sort of how to research and critically dissect and talk about a lot of these ideas. And I say that because, you know, though my exposure to ufology has been very brief, perhaps mercifully brief, one of the things that I've been kind of astounded by is just like the abysmal scientific and information literacy I've seen in the community. Like people who just seem to have no sort of meaningful heuristic for evaluating information or conducting research or thinking critically about it. And I don't think this is the fault of people in many respects, because I don't think we live in like a culture with an education system that helps people develop critical thought. But we've been trying to have, I would say, these like upscaled or elevated conversations.
Yeah, I tuned in and I was surprised at like how sort of you guys take a very serious and scientific approach to it, and I think that's one of the things that's lacking here. You know, you think people tune in to hear a show about UFOs, and they get to hear about like the Galactic Council and reptilian alien bases on Mars and the Mars secret missions to kill the insectoid aliens, and that's why people make fun of this. But you guys are attacking it from much more scientific, and you guys have a big, you know, people know their history on your show. They know, like, you know, the general history of the mythology in UFOs and where some of that mythology came from. I was really surprised at how, don't take it the wrong way, but I wasn't expecting what I got. I wasn't expecting much because no offense, but the bar's pretty low.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Dude, there's
so I tuned in and I went, God damn, this is good. I even posted it in the Discord here. And I generally, Leah, I don't like the competition. I'm not posting a bunch of other people's shows in my Discord. I did for you though, because I think it's important that people tune in.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I just think there's like the community needs better role models, right? Like it needs better people talking about these things. And I'm not exactly the arbiter of what constitutes better, but I think I can do better than a lot of the shit that I see, quite frankly. And like, I also understand too in the community, like there are a lot of people here that do not want their ideas confronted. They don't want them analyzed. They're here for entertainment or validation. I know, it's shocking, right? It's crazy.
I don't know anything about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And you brought something up. I don't remember if it was backstage before the show or when we just started talking here, but basically about like bringing in experts. And I think one of the things too is like there's this like weird strain of like anti-intellectualism or anti-expertise that exists in this community that sort of sees people not having credentials as being an asset rather than a liability. And I'm of the opposite camp where like, if I don't know something, I want to defer to an expert. Like I want to bring in someone who knows their shit and who can talk competently about complex or sophisticated subjects and help us sort of integrate it into this subject. And like, that's one of the things I've liked about your show is like bringing on experts to talk about things in areas that maybe you don't have expertise, but understanding the importance of having a space for expertise to be present. You know, it's interesting. I feel like ufology in many ways is just kind of this like crazy microcosm of the world at large, right? Like I've tried to tell people like being into UFOs isn't really about flying saucers. It's about being into all sorts of stuff like consciousness and metaphysics and reality and belief systems and all sorts of things.
Too.
And occultism. Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. UFOs just becomes like a really convenient shorthand to talk about those subjects for sort of the communal in-groups. And also just, dude, the grift in this space is unbelievable. Like, not just the money grift, but like the intellectual grift. It's just so disingenuous.
Yeah, the grifting is the problem that I have. And lately, a lot of people are saying things to me like, Stephen, we get it. You bust all these frauds, but like, where's the good people? And I'm trying. Like, it's not my fault. I just, I investigate people and their stories. It's not my fault if half of them turn out to be full of it. And I report that, but tomorrow we're having a very credible researcher on UFO crashes, so there are credible people out there. You just got to really dig for them. They're not the famous ones,
Yeah, the guy who talks about Ely, Nevada, he was on Art Bell's Dark Matter when it first was starting on Sirius XM. I very distinctly remember it because I'd never heard anything about Ely, Nevada, so I'll definitely be tuning into that. Yeah. Oh yeah, Dean Radin. Yeah, he's been great on Coast to Coast too. Philadelphia Experiment. Yeah, that's like Al Bialik and Preston Nichols.
Oh, that's
those guys. Yeah.
Not a fan of that, but Spooky was able to find 1 second. I thought I had it. I did have it. Oh yeah, Spooky was able to find that Art Bell clip with David Wilcock calling in. So we're gonna cite fair use. We're gonna cite fair use and let me do that.
I feel like I should be taking a bong rip before watching this.
It's kind of a requirement.
I can time travel too. Yeah.
It's kind of a requirement, right? But this is funny. This is really funny. Coast to Coast AM continues. Oh, let me.
Area 51, but this guy tripped me up. He's on the line now, and I can tell you're like in a vehicle of some kind.
Yes, Currently, I'm driving a truck right now because I'm making a historical study of life in the 20th century. And there's really no better way to study it than getting out there and seeing it and experiencing it.
So you're sort of slumming in the 20th, huh?
There you go. Actually, I'm from the 21st century, or the 21st century, the year 2072.
Yeah, real credible people.
You try to make it out like I'm farting when it's not even real, and you don't.
Yeah,
I was very loving of you. You probably authorized all kinds of good karma for
sharing
yourself.
his channel.
Actually, it came to me that way, and I laughed, and I was like, "All right."
Oh, your friend put the fart in?
Yeah.
Jeez.
And I worked at Area 51, or I guess you would say I will work at Area 51, which at that time is the nation's capital. There's a series of catastrophes that will occur, and I don't want to create a paradox by saying too much.
I was really surprised because I certainly do not let him rip like that in public. I didn't remember releasing that kind of gas.
He doesn't fart, apparently.
And then after a while, I realized it was a hand fart because I think there's like two of them.
Well, it's actually
overlap.
He got it from free sounds.
Oh, free sounds on the internet.
Yeah.
But some events occur around the turn of the
so
century.
stupid.
The eastern part of the country, things happen where the government of the United States has to relocate.
Now, bear in mind that you're on the air right now in Washington, D.C. on WWRC. I mean, they're all listening to you. So,
yes, that's why I have to be very careful.
Please be very careful, yes. So you're saying around the turn of the century, around 2000, something is going to happen.
Yeah, I don't want to get into any more than that.
Gee, that was wrong.
I worked as an aide for the office of the president at Area 51. And in that time, in 2072, the reason Area 51 was picked to be the capital of the United States, and for that matter, basically a one-world government is set up with the United States leading that effort.
Oh, good.
There is,
he said, "Oh, good."
No question of life throughout the universe. In fact, there'll be several races of aliens living with us. I can't get into much more detail than that. But
let me ask you a question. How far can you go? We all know what a paradox is. Going back and killing your father, if time travel were possible, would suddenly negate you at least in one time. How far can you go in telling us things without creating a paradox, something that will shift what otherwise would occur in a timeline?
Well, I can't actually alter events For example, if I come back now and I know if I invest in a certain thing in the stock market and become a huge multimillionaire,
yes,
when that individual who I am now didn't, according to my current history,
you would have changed things radically.
Right. And so I have to be very careful. Now, speaking in general terms, like I'm doing to you over the air.
So then we can safely assume Bill Gates is not a time traveler?
Bill Gates is not a time traveler.
Okay.
Bill Gates is Bill Gates, and
got his money honestly in this timeline.
Yes, he honestly got it in this timeline, though there's some interesting things about Bill Gates. Without going into detail, expect Bill Gates to enter politics before too long.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I figured it would.
Is that something that could potentially? I mean, you must be on the gray line there regarding a paradox.
Well, I am, but here's the beauty of it. When I'm on the phone with you talking, it's subjective. It's people's opinion. So what I really say is real subjective. Some people might believe it, some people won't. So I'm fairly safe in making general statements like that because probably a lot of people aren't going to believe it anyway.
That's right. And so let me ask you this. Is there something minor but very specific that you can give us that's going to happen in the near-term future that we can watch for and
Here's
say,
how you know it's
the guy from 2072 called
it.
Yeah, we're going to have probably about March of this coming winter.
Yes.
Southern California and Arizona are going to suffer severe flooding as a result of the El Nino that's building. And in 1999, the winter of 1999, there's going to be a major devastating earthquake in Southern California.
Neither of those things happened.
Wait a minute, that was the winter of 99?
Are you telling me his predictions were
99.
wrong,
How big
Stephen?
will it be?
Yes,
you know?
yes. And I guess that's enough of that. But that's one of the reasons why I think it is David Wilcock, is because he couldn't predict anything to save his life. All of his prophetic predictions fail. And you said you grew up Jewish. Like, I grew up Catholic, and there's something called the test of a prophet to a Christian. David Wilcock claims to be the world's greatest prophet, but all of his prophetic predictions fail. And in Christianity, if one fails, they're not a prophet. So I always laugh, I cackle out loud when he calls himself the world's greatest prophet.
But he still has, dude, he still has those true believers who follow him. And with everyone he gets wrong, their faith just increases.
Yeah, it's funny to me that he never explains all the wrong predictions. You know how he's been predicting mass arrests for 22 years now. And nothing.
Yeah, classic apocalyptic doomer. Yeah. Like the fodder that fed a million conspiracy theories over the last 20 years. Collapse of the government, one world government, FEMA death camps, whatever.
Patty says Art was the master of the paranormal interview.
Yeah, he was. He could walk that beautiful line between showman and credulity without buying into whatever the guest was saying. He was just this master entertainer, and I feel like you don't really see that very often. Now you generally will see hosts that are totally credulous to the claims of their guests.
Yeah, and I just want to bring back. I heard somebody earlier asking about the channel we mentioned that had their YouTube video taken down by Third Phase of Moon.
Oh yeah.
Video unavailable. This video is no longer available due to a copyright claim by Blake Cousins, and it's very important that people realize that this video was a ridiculous takedown of their tactics and hoaxing techniques. It perfectly illustrates and shows how they faked over 30 of their videos, and also calls this Rich from Goofon on the carpet for saying they haven't faked anything for 5 years, then goes on to show a bunch of videos they faked in the past year or two. So it pretty much proves that people are lying. I didn't expect them to take it down because they claim to be supporters of free speech and all this other stuff and supporters of fair use. After all, everything they do is fair use. They're taking videos from wherever they want and putting it on their channel. I would think that's fair use, but apparently you can't take a clip from their show or they copyright claim you and have your video removed. Remember, folks, this is a hard strike against this person's YouTube channel. Get a few more of those and your YouTube channel gets nuked. So that's unfortunate. But it's not, I guess I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised because I'm one of the few people that have seen that documentary, Leah. It is like, there's no arguing with this documentary. Once you watch this 2-hour documentary, you just see 30 or 40 examples of things they faked or manipulated or, you know, totally hoaxed it. And they're claiming to be credible researchers that really care about the truth. It's pretty clear they're about clickbait and just getting paid for fake UFO videos.
Yeah, I mean, from what you've said about the documentary, it sounds pretty damning, right?
We're going to see what we can do about getting that video seen by more people than it would have been otherwise then. You know, I can try. Spooky says, I will put it in a torrent. And so will I.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and there's the solution right there. But I
put
also...
it on Napster and LimeWire.
Dropbox, LimeWire, Napster. Yes, yes. I wonder if those things still exist. No, they don't. Well, I'm sure the .com still exists for scammers that just have ads, right? I haven't looked at that in so long. It's funny you mention that.
Everybody uses torrent now. Nobody uses like P2P file sharing.
Oh, there's still a Napster.com. Music from every angle. It's $9.99 a month, and it is a streaming service now.
Everything old is new again, man.
Yeah, Napster's back.
Better than ever.
And of course, MySpace is still there, but yeah.
Incredible.
MySpace is still there, still holding on, trying to come back, right? Trying to get people off of Facebook, maybe.
Internet 1.0 is coming back. Like Discord is just IRC.
You're right about that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do a Discord,
streaming.
But I'm glad that we did because I enjoy the Discord.
Yeah, it gives the community a space to talk. And also it takes you out of the kind of walled garden that most of these platforms are. Like the Facebook platforms, Twitter, like you're beholden to whatever the rules and censorship policies are of these platforms. So at least being on like Discord,
Spooky
lets you kind of disintermediate that stuff.
Yeah,
dude, time is a flat circle. Yeah.
Next Escape Navigator will be back soon.
And ICQ, IRC, it'll be great. BBSs.
Don't laugh, but I know somebody that's still running one. You can tell that into it. There's many people still playing Trade Wars.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, like I'm not surprised. I have a couple of friends that have gone deep into like building web rings on websites that they're building now, like we talked about, like in Notepad, writing their own HTML. Like that's all the disenfranchised nerds that went into tech are realizing that it's a huge scam that ruins your life. So they're just going back to being cool.
Don't say that. I'm one of those nerds.
Dude, so am I. Like
I got in trouble when I was a kid.
Else.
Leah, when my father and mother were away for the weekend, I was 14 years old. I called the phone company and I got them to install 8 phone lines, and I had an 8-line BBS Wares board.
Incredible.
Really. And one time I screwed up, and you know how they had those ATA commands? I left the speakers on or something, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and you know the screech from the
they're all
imagine this screech from 8 modems, and my dad gets up and he's like, "What the hell is going on in here? Why do you have all these modems?"
Like Dolby surround sound in the mid-90s.
And then I had to explain it to him, and then I did eventually. I went the straight and narrow, and no more, only public domain software, all legal. And then I had people would send me $3 a month to get, you get an hour free or unlimited time with $3 a month. And people would send me $3 in the mail, and I would just get all this cash. And then my dad was like, all right. And then he's like, you sure this is legal? I'm like, yeah, it's legal. I don't have any pirate software anymore. You know, it's legal. But
totally
I had to silence the modems, you know, and then eventually we got up to 12 phone lines before BBS's the internet came and
Incredible.
killed my money venture. I was making pretty
Yeah.
good money doing that.
You were one of the early .com bubbles.
I
at
was
first.
going to that mail every day, going $3, $3, $3. Yes, you know.
So I won a programming contest when I was like 13 and got flown out. So I was living in New York at the time, and I got flown out to Seattle to go to the Microsoft headquarters. And like super cool 13-year-old Leah wore a Linux t-shirt to Microsoft headquarters in Redmond. I thought that was just the coolest thing. And then that summer I went to the Hope Conference in New York City, which was like a big deal. And got to meet like a bunch of the kind of OG groups, like the Cult of the Dead Cow out of Lubbock and I think Texas Tech. Got to meet Jello Biafra was like the head speaker, which is really funny. Like the lead singer of the Dead Kennedys spoke. Got to meet Cheshire Cat, who was like kind of an OG like phone freaking guy. This is like the stuff of my childhood.
Yeah, I used to get 2600 magazine, Lee.
Yeah, dude, I still get 2600 magazine.
Yeah, I didn't know they're still around too.
Oh, it's still around, and it's like $25 a year. It is amazing. Like, it is just as like ramshackle and zine-like as it ever was. Like, the guy who ran it, Emmanuel Goldstein, was supposedly like a huge creeper. But I just love that this spirit of like the internet 1.0 is like alive and starting to thrive again, because to me that was like where the real promise of technology was. It wasn't in these like aggregation platforms like Facebook and Reddit. It was in these like little dark forest communities that come out for people to connect about their really weird and arcane interests.
I honestly miss the BBS community, and here's why. Yeah. You could go online, but you could meet these people in real lives. There was IRC, and you could go to your city, like Philly IRC. And then there was these, chat boards that you could go to in your city because you didn't want to dial long distance. And then my BBS, other BBSs, we would get together and have get-togethers in these public
LAN parties.
Yeah, we would have these big parties in a park that would go on forever, and go there and drink and meet all the people. And it was interesting after you had chatted with somebody online for a year to put a name to their face and meet them and see what they were like in real life. And then of course there was the phenomenon of modem heifers, Leah. We had that. You go meet the girls and be like, damn, she sounded so hot online,
Oh, that's why she was on her computer.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah, back then it was
I don't know. I was living on my computer and whatever.
Yeah, back then it was so rare. I kind of liked being in that. You felt like special because you were online and nobody even knew about it, generally. I mean, before the internet and like AOL and everybody having it, it was the BBSs were more local, and you got to meet people, and there was meetups for hardware. So you would go to these places and like buy parts or buy computers, and somebody'd be selling like 10 Commodore 64s that didn't work for $25, and you would buy them all and drag them home.
It's like going to like a ham radio swap meet now. Like, or like buying how many copies of the Anarchist Cookbook did I have on floppy disks, right? It's the glory days of being on the internet.
You're changing grades and dial up, and you know what? Art Bell was a part of all that, because I used to listen to that show while I was on playing online games, text-based games, or MUDs, multi-user dimensions, or all of that stuff. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and he also had a BBS. So like there was that publication they ran, Dark. What was it called? After Dark. But there was an Art Bell BBS, and that was where a lot of these pictures and early like
you would go,
like ancillary media. You would dial in.
You would dial in, and it would take you 10 minutes to download one image, and then it would go across your screen real slow as it was downloading.
Like looks like it's coming out of like a dot matrix printer.
Oh God! In some ways, I don't miss those times, but in other ways, I do, because it was simpler and everything was like I said, I feel more special now that everybody's on the internet. Even people that are like totally opposed or were totally opposed to even having a computer are all over the internet now because of phones,
And so much of the internet now is just like extractive attention economy, right? Like it's just about getting your attention and getting you to click on stuff. It's not about like one-to-one community building or discussion, right? Like how many spaces in our lives do we get to connect with people in a purely intellectual space? Like it doesn't happen.
Erica Lukes is here. Welcome,
Erica. Hey, Erica. Nice to see you.
Yeah, Erica Lukes and I will have an announcement soon. Exciting stuff going on, but I'm glad to see her and all of you people, crazy people. But it's okay, we're crazy too. So Yeah, I don't know what else to say about Art Bell. If you have anything else to add, I would just say I wouldn't be here without him. And I think fondly about all those times. Of course, a lot of that, your memory becomes an amalgam. You know, it all runs together. But I think fondly about those times of sitting in my room late at night and being excited for the guest that night and tuning in and can't wait to hear what Stanton Friedman or Bob Lazar or even back then, honestly, I didn't know better, Linda Moulton Howe or whoever that was going to tell me about the truth about aliens tonight, you know?
Yeah.
It was a
I mean,
great time.
the only thing I wanted to do was just like plug real quick. I have my Twitter handle here in my name. I'm private right now because I'm on the job market. I don't want prospective employers seeing that all I talk about is UFOs and psychedelics and meditation. But I have open DMs, so like just like if anyone wants to connect on this project, talk about art, talk about anything we've talked about tonight, like I'd love to talk to you, love to interview you and involve you in it, even just to set up some time to hear about like your favorite shows and guests and stuff.
Sure, yeah.
And then Invisible Night School, you can check us out on YouTube, The Invisible Night School or theinvisiblenightschool.com. We run live streams and periodic Twitter spaces, basically trying to elevate the conversation around ufology.
Yeah, they're trying to make it classy, people. Help them, support them. And somebody asked, did we talk about Art Bell's death? Near as I know, Art Bell died from an accidental overdose of several different drugs that were prescription drugs, which is sad. But he was getting up there, but it is sad that he died accidentally. Maybe he would have had a few more years in him if that not happened. I remember it being very sad. And of course, lots of conspiracies popped up.
Tons of conspiracies.
Yeah, he wasn't dead yet. He was in hiding somewhere. I remember hearing that he was on the run from the Men in Black.
Yeah, I mean, I heard lots of suicide rumors. John Lear came out swinging with the suicide rumor like before Art's body was in the ground.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Syndication, of course. Yeah. Distribution and also finding like a subject and a time slot that both hadn't been exploited at all.
The one other thing that I would mention is that it seems that some person who I'm not a fan of has sort of hoarded all of the Art Bell episodes and now you have to pay. I guess it's coast to coast. I don't know. But I think they bought up all of the Art Bell episodes and you have to pay to get a subscription to listen to his classic episodes. And I mean, maybe that's a lesson for all of us that we should have something in our will. If we like, for me, if I were to die tomorrow, I would want all of my shows to be free always. I would want somebody to go to my YouTube channel, turn off all the ads and make a Google Drive and put everything I've ever done for free to everybody to listen to and archive forever. But in Art Bell's case, it seems that there's a profit motive there, and now they want
Premier Broadcasting just scooped.
They probably bought it up, scooped it up, and now you got to pay to listen to those classic episodes. But of course, there is alternatives to that I'm not allowed to discuss. But some people know that there's ways to get anything that you want via certain
the internet
sites.
has everything.
Yes, it does. Yes, I just had a discussion with my wife because she wants to see the new Game of Thrones, and she's going to pay for HBO, and I'm like, well, if you want to, I could get it. You know,
your wife is a nice law-abiding citizen.
Yes, she wants to do it. She wants to do it the right way, so we're going to do that. But I'm a little sad though, because I think if there was like a YouTube channel with all the episodes on it for free or giving the money to charity, maybe that I would be acceptable with. If I croaked tomorrow and somebody wanted to take all of my stuff and just leave it monetized, but give all the money to a charity of my choice or what, you know, I don't know. I'm just sad that they're not available so easily because there could be a whole generation that missed all that could enjoy it again, you know? And I think Art would want that. Don't you think he would want that?
I mean, right. Yeah. He was contrarian enough and subversive enough. He would totally want his material shared. I mean, that was a major reason he got pushed off SiriusXM is he wanted to be able to stream free for people to access the show. And I've heard estimates, like I've actually talked and spoken with a couple of people that are archiving his shows, and they estimate that basically about a third of his shows are captured and archived. I'm sure in someone's random shoebox of cassette tapes from 1996, there are shows that aren't digitally archived, but like the estimate seems to be about a third of his shows are available online.
Well, that's
me too. Art Bell's totally been like my therapy, right? Like going through tough times. Like I just queue it right up. Yeah.
Yeah, and every
He's a
once in a
great
while I
companion.
feel nostalgic, or like in the case of this Dr. Jonathan Reed, I got those episodes so that I
Oh
could
yeah.
listen again, and boy, that was like a blast from the past. Like I felt like I was like, a
A time
teenager.
traveler.
Yeah, it felt like I was
Yeah.
a teenager again in my little room in my parents' house, keeping it real low so I don't wake up my dad and him start yelling at me for why am I still awake or whatever. It was but every once in a while I do feel nostalgic and go back to some old episode of Art Bell. It's comforting to me, and it's a part of my growing up, and
Hmm.
formative to me for not so much my style or doing things, but just the desire to want to do a radio show came from Art Bell for me. It
Right.
really
The
did.
ability to talk to really cool people about arcane subjects. It's so appealing. And that's why like I've loved stepping into podcasting and Twitter spaces as well. Uh, they're conversations I don't get to have like in my daily life. So it's always exciting to be able to connect and have dialogue with people that are interested in the same weird stuff that I'm into.
Yeah, and I guess that's the benefit of the internet, that it can gather together people that have very certain interests, where before
Hmm.
you might know one other person that was into this weird stuff, but now through the internet you can connect with thousands
Oh
of
yeah.
people that are interested in any topic you're interested in.
It,
And you know
yeah.
this from technology. Like if you're interested in, like, I don't know, Arduino microcontrollers, there's these forums that you could go to with thousands of people that can help you with
Yep.
problems, and talk about the possibilities or what you can do programming them or what you can add to them. And it's amazing. It's a
Hmm.
great resource if you avoid. I think though, for the internet, for me, I try to avoid all the mainstream media and
Like the
every
aggregators.
corporate interest. Like I'm interested
Yeah.
in the niche subculture weirdo stuff,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, one of the Amy Collins here estimates about 2,000 shows. Yeah, the most comprehensive archive I've seen is about 1,340 shows digitized. So that's about like what, like 60%,
I got a
which is
long way to
actually
go
better than I
myself
thought.
then, because I
Yeah.
have nowhere near that, right? I nowhere near that as far as number of shows that I have produced. But he was there for a
He
long,
was
long time,
prolific. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he hosted 6 nights a week for 20 odd years. I mean, that's an incredibly rigorous schedule, especially, I can't imagine having the intensity of conversation that many hours every night, day after day. Like, no wonder he was such a curmudgeon in daily life, just having
Maybe
to deal
that's
with
what
these
put him
people
in
for
a
like
yeah.
hours.
Maybe that's what put him in such a bad mood, right? You never
Had him
know.
smoking a bunch of cigarettes and taking a bunch of pain pills. Um,
Yeah, maybe that contributed to some of his health problems, though. We never know, right?
yeah.
Well, that's pretty sad. It's sad that he's gone. I would like to hear what he would have to say about today's world of the paranormal, and if he would be surprised to see, thousands and thousands and thousands of shows on these topics now instead of.
The
He
proliferation.
was a little bit competitive, though. I remember he called Jeff Rentz a cheap ripoff of him, and he didn't like other shows. He did not like other shows like his. But I guess you can't blame him if he thought this is my concept and my idea, and these other people are stealing this concept or idea. You know,
Hmm. Yeah, I
a
mean, he
little.
felt like he had the market cornered, and also that he built that market too. So, of course, I would imagine he felt some degree of ownership over it.
Yeah, and I guess of course we have these people that just go opportunists who say, well, this guy's got millions of listeners. I could get a few 100,000 and still make a decent living. Maybe not as good as him, but
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I'm sad that he's gone. I wish he could come back. I would love to have interviewed him, right? If he was still around, that would be interesting, or see what he would be doing now. But you're right. He was very introverted and liked to live by himself off in the desert, kind of a crabby old guy. But I still love him.
Yep. Yeah, he was incredible. And his legacy lives on, right? Like,
Lives on through people like me for sure, and I recognize
yeah.
that. I definitely do. You know. So, what is the projects that you're working on coming up on your Invisible College deal? And do you want to mention any of the stuff that you've got coming up before you go?
Sure. Yeah. So, Well, so I'm actually going to be at the UFO and Anomalous Phenomena event in New York City this weekend with Gary Nolan. So this is going to be anthropological. So no live stream this weekend. I'll be UFO Twitter.
You gotta go ask him why he blocked Stephen Cambion from Truthseekers while you're there.
I'll make sure to look him straight in the eye and ask
Film it. Yeah, say, Steve Cambion sent me. Why'd you block him for asking a question? Yeah.
So our next show is going to be the weekend, I think, of the 15th. We'll be diving into uapstudy.com, run by Campbell Morera, talking about plasma physics, gas, all these theories sort of around ufology that have been promoted and documented through different scientific research and government reports. I expect we're going to also continue like widening out like what we're talking about. Probably going to do another like parapsychology show with Nick. So yeah, you can find that at the Invisible Night School.
Look how professional, folks. She's got notes and everything, right?
Right. I'm not even reading it. I'm not. This is like.
Oh, I thought you were reading it.
I'm on autopilot right now, man.
I'm like, oh my god,
it's like
she's
muscle
so
memory.
professional. She's got notes and everything.
But I'm also working on starting like my own individual project called Version Zero, and this is just conversations with people who I think are sort of culture carriers about like the role of technology and like epistemology, like how people build their worldviews. So I'm going to have some interviews coming out with some people that I think most of your audience will be familiar with, but those are still in the works. I expect to get those out probably like by end of month for the first round.
Well, you're a busy girl, and
I don't have a job, so I'm an unemployed degenerate. So
yeah, welcome to my world. But I always have an excuse. I go, well, I've got a business I'm building, so it's okay, you know. Like besides,
I'm just becoming a UFO person, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But I want to thank you for coming here, and make sure that you send me the link to your next show. I will retweet it and put it in our Discord. You're always welcome to do that. I think Absolutely. I saw you in our Discord. You're welcome to post your shows or whatever it is that you have going on there to help promote you. It would be my pleasure. You're raising the bar for a lot of this stuff, which I'm happy to see.
I'm trying. And, I really appreciate your support, especially since I'm so new to the community. It's been awesome to connect with you. And
well, you and I have such a similar, we like so many of the same things. And we're both nerds,
turbo nerds.
So,
yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me tonight. Love talking about art.
And it was great to talk about this. And I think it's about time that somebody did a show like this, sort of a tribute to Art Bell. I haven't heard anybody really even mention him in a while. So,
yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I'm going to throw you out of here, and we're going to bounce on out of here. So thanks for your participation. You're always welcome, and the door's always open. Come back. I would appreciate that.
I'd love to. Thank you, Stephen. Have a nice night.
All right. Thank you, Leah. All right, friends. So what a fun conversation, and a little lighter tonight. We've been delving into too many dark areas for too long. Tomorrow night, I have an excellent researcher, which we will be delving into crash retrievals, or not crash retrievals, UFO crashes. And that is going to be a great show, especially for you people who have been asking me for quite some time, why don't you have, more credible researchers? Well, I'm trying to get them. And tomorrow we will have one 9 p.m. Eastern time. That would be Jeremy Mader, who you may have heard on the Art Bell show before he ended his run, right towards the end of his run. I think he was the third from the last guest that Art Bell ever had. And we will have more to share about this recent attack on free speech from the Cousins brothers. Again, I mentioned that someone had come out with a documentary with overwhelming proof and evidence and totally damaging proof that they have faked many, many videos. And what was Blake Cousins' response to that? He filed what I believe to be a false copyright claim. Blake Cousins filed that to have the video removed from the internet so you couldn't see it. Immediately after ending tonight's broadcast, I will be developing a plan to make sure that you can see it. I believe that, and I'm entitled to my own beliefs, I believe that Blake Cousins did this because this is the most comprehensive, most complete, most damaging to them documentary or debunk of what it is they do. I'm one of the few people who have seen it. This video shows overwhelming, friends, evidence of their fakery, fraudery, and manipulation of the public in order to make money. It shows the videos that are fake, why they're fake, how they fake them, and it is very fact-based, evidence-based, science-based, and it is so well done that they would have, them and Rich from GoofOn would have no arguments anymore. They could not say, we don't fake things, or we haven't faked things recently. The documentary addresses Rich's comments that they haven't faked things recently. It addresses him lying to everyone, including his own audience, saying they haven't faked things, or if it was proven that they faked things recently, I just couldn't associate with them. This video, this documentary addresses that. And I believe that the Cousins brothers are running scared here. They know that if this documentary gets out, all of their talking points and lies of the past 6 months, including their dispute with me, I will be vindicated here completely. And so will everyone else who says Third Phase is not credible. They're not to be trusted. They fake things for years. When they started recently, it's very troubling to me that they copyright claimed, and this is a hard strike, friends. So this person gets a strike, and they forced the video off of this person's YouTube channel. But like I said, we're going to immediately when I am off broadcast tonight, I am developing a plan to make sure that this video will be distributed far and wide and to platforms that Blake Cousins will be unable to get removed. Whatever it is I have to do to get the truth out about these people, I will do. Now, as far as hosting it here myself, that'll be something that I have to consider strongly, because I don't believe that I want to risk a hard strike and a legal battle, though I do have very good, fair use legal defense letters, which I will be sharing with this documentary filmmaker so that he can fight this unjust attack on free speech. It is clearly fair use what he did, taking clips of them faking things and then showing people exactly how they fake those videos. It's fair use. He did this to educate the public about their fakery, and I just don't even know what else to say. Why would somebody falsely copyright claim somebody, except he didn't want you, my friends, to see this incredible 2-hour documentary, which documents 30 or 40 of their hoaxes over the years. It's very damaging to them, especially given their recent talking points. They're not going to be able to use those talking points anymore, because everyone's going to know that they faked things in the past 2 years a lot. So that is where we're at, friends, and that is where we find ourselves. I will be back tomorrow night with Jeremy Mader, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name. I'm going to check in with him later and make sure that I'm pronouncing it correctly. But he is a very fact-based, evidence-based researcher, and he has done some incredible deep dives into UFO crashes right in his area. He went there. He interviewed witnesses. He found out all kinds of stuff. It's an amazing story that we are proud to bring you tomorrow night, 9 p.m., UFO crashes with Jeremy Mader. One of the other things I'll do is immediately after ending the broadcast tonight, I'm going to put up tomorrow night's 9 p.m. stream so that you all will have the link ready, and I will tweet it out as well tonight. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. I want to remind you to be back here tomorrow night at 9 p.m. where we will finally have, yes, I'm calling this person a credible researcher. I've looked into his work. Very, very impressive young man who is a boots on the ground, go there and interview people, get to the truth of the story kind of a guy. And I can't wait to dive into these many, more than one UFO crashes that he has thoroughly investigated. And we'll be here to do that again, 9 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. I want to thank Leah and also apologize for being a terrible show host. Because of some of this drama with this video being copyright claimed, I did not do what I usually do, which is to put her YouTube channel and Twitter in the description of the video. I'll do that as soon as we're off air tonight as well. So it should be in the bottom of the video. And I apologize to her for not doing that sooner. We'll get it done. We want to thank each and every one of our kind and generous benefactors. I will do one more thing, which is to check in. We get a little, I got a little distracted tonight talking to Leah. Her and I have so many common interests, and our history is so similar. Great person to talk to. Let me make sure that we read each and every one of the super chats. So let me make sure that we've done that. Yes, we did. Patrick Sheehan with a kind and generous $9.99. He said, great guest and topic. And then we will mention that you can become a member here on YouTube for $5 a month. And we recognize our channel members. My Flock is Everywhere, Wreaking Havoc 215, Guy Cracker, Lindsay Gardner, John Williams, 76 Degree Pyramid Power, Cynthia Mack, Gary Arnold, Complizard, Mr. Fish, Martin Wright, Sweet Caroline, UFO John Doe, Sid Vitch, Annie Kurtz, and Reload. Those are our members here, and we want to thank them and recognize them. Also, you can become a Patreon member for as little as $1 a month. I got to figure out if you want your name read as a Patreon supporter, just email me your chat room user ID, because the problem is a lot of people are on Patreon as their real name, and I don't think everybody wants me reading their real name, but we'd be happy to recognize you Patreon supporters and thank you as well. The other way, of course, that you can help us is by me reminding you to do the thing that all good YouTubers remind you to do, which is to make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share these videos. It really does help us with the YouTube algorithms to reach more people. Also, I generally read all of the comments, respond to as many as I can. And I try to pin my favorite comment from every show at the top. So if you have a great comment, it will be highlighted at the top here. We're trying to encourage more discussion. We love the discussion. We're a free speech zone here. You can say whatever you like, but please be respectful of all the guests. That's all that I ask you. So that's all we got for you, friends. Until next time. And next time will be, again, tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's all I got, friends. Until next time. But I will remind you that we will be doing an update on this third phase of Moon censoring the documentary, exposing their fakery very, very soon. As soon as I can possibly develop a plan to make sure that everybody is able to see that documentary, I will do it. I happen to now have a copy of it, and glad that I got a copy of it before it was censored off the internet by the people who don't want you to see it. And that would be Third Phase of Moon, Blake and Brent Cousins. And of course, Rich from Goofon really doesn't want you to see this video because it will prove him a complete and total liar. I don't know what else to say about that situation. Every time I think that this drama-rama is over, they do something else stupid, like try to stop people from seeing the proof that they fake things, including recently. But there you have it. Yeah. So we'll be back tomorrow evening, friends. Until next time, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night, and God bless all of you, especially you, Art Bell, wherever you are. I miss you.